because of the gender factor considered in funding education. But the opposing speakers were armed with convincing arguments and facts bordering on the cultural and economic hindrances to the full realization of the girl child's potential.
The 2018 Global Education Monitoring Report that just came out recently found that only 66% of countries have achieved gender parity in primary education, 45 in lower secondary, and only 25 in upper secondary. Major gaps still exist. And at the end of the day, girls are disproportionately suffering. We know, for instance, that there are over 15 million girls that never set foot in a classroom. And not only do we have to consider the fact that we are not spending too much, we are actually not spending enough.
That in the country where that court case took place, there were no women in the justice system. And with no women in the justice system, how could that system truly take account of the impact of gender-based violence? And if you took a step back, there were no women in the education system, or very few, as principals or indeed even as teachers.
Harping on the need to implement education reforms rather than sign bigger checks on girl-child education, the proposing speakers also did well to get the audience's attention.
We've tried this. We've run experiments around the world of just putting more inputs into existing schooling systems. We've tried randomized trials in more textbooks and flip charts and one laptop per child and building school libraries and all kinds of things. And in India and Kenya and the Philippines and Indonesia, again and again and again, those experiments find no impact on learning for boys or for girls. If we're serious about improving learning, we know things that work. Pratham in India has a way of teaching girls to read quite quickly and cheaply.
We have, for example, divided up a woman and all she cares about into a multitude of segments and divvied responsibility of each to different and competing groups. Her stomach has gone to WFP, her ovaries to UNFPA, children to UNICEF, employment and voice to UN Women, vaccines to Gavi, and her crops and animals to FAO. In every sector and in every setting, we must focus on and for the entirety of women's bodies and needs.
Supporters of the motion were tasked on how education reforms can be implemented without bigger checks, especially in Nigeria, which contributes the highest number to the world's out-of-school children, being 10.5 million. And in response to this, Nigeria got a reprimand on accountability in education expenditure.
So that spending, not to write larger checks. Nigeria's problems in the public sector have never been from a lack of sovereign rents. Nigeria has a lot of cash to spend relative to other countries with similar income levels. It needs to spend that money more effectively. That applies in health, but also in education, and also in the case of girls' education.
After all was said and done, the opposing speakers won decisively. And so it appears that somewhere beneath the argument lies the agreement from both sides of the divide, whether it is for or against, that what is in fact more important is the accountability and transparency of funds expended, whether on boy-child or girl-child education, than the quantum of investment spent. But of course, there is also the point about the challenges surrounding girl-child education. And until the next debate chamber, I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo, TVC News, Dubai.